So I am Jack Green, President of the Board, and I have the pleasure of introducing Ravé Mehta. He's an award-winning engineer, a tech entrepreneur, a music producer, and a best-selling author. His recent book is The Inventor, The Story of Tesla. It's based on the true story of Nikola Tesla and how he battled his mentor-turned-rival, Thomas Edison, in the AC-DC wars to spark the electrical era and bring light and energy to the four corners of the world. Since its release, The Inventor has become the #1 best-selling non-fiction graphic novel and is being used in schools as part of an innovative STEM learning strategy. Ravé is also the CEO of Helios Entertainment, an award-winning creative technology firm that is developing socially empowering content to artistically engage kids in STEM learning in graphic novels, music, games, film, and digital media. He discussed this in his TED Talk, Reimagining Education in a Hyper-Visual Culture. Prior to Helios, Mehta was the principal and executive vice president of Modus Technologies, which used gaming technology to develop virtual reality training simulations for the Department of Defense to significantly increase knowledge transfer and retention. Ravé is the recipient of the Tesla Vision Award and a former member of the board of directors of Space Florida, the official Florida space agency, and a contributor to the Huffington Post. Welcome. Ravé.
Thank you. I love it when someone else makes the intro. Pleasure to meet you all. Thank you for coming in. Nancy and Alana, thank you for inviting me to speak here to your amazing group of kids and parents and your entire team. This has been really an eye-opening experience for me. I've traveled around speaking with different schools and in different classes, and you guys are really smart, I have to say. Yeah, I was really impressed with the presentations I've seen this morning, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more of them tomorrow. I'm one of the judges for the energy and environment presentation pitch series as well. How many here know who Nikola Tesla is? Okay, I'm hopefully in an audience that would know who he is, but you'd be surprised how many people who do not. So how this all started was when I was on the Florida Space Board. Florida Space Board is called Space Florida. That's their agency. And we did a deal with Stephen Hawking to create a microgravity research laboratory joint venture. So I started researching programs to put into the research laboratory, and I kept running into Nikola Tesla's research. And I knew who he was peripherally, but I didn't really know the details of the story. And what I did know, I found out was completely wrong. So as I dug in deeper to his story, I realized that this guy has had, not only has he created some amazing things that we completely take for granted today as a society and as a world, but he had an epic journey of how he got there. He was an inventor, an entrepreneur, an artist, but ultimately he was a creator. And I really felt like someone needs to tell the story because I didn't see it out there outside of books on what he's invented, but not really his life journey. So I decided to write a story in the form of a graphic novel. I'm going to give you guys a really brief glimpse into what that amounted to. And I'm also a music producer, and I produced a music video, a whole album inspired by the book called Rise, and our band's name is Renaissance. And we actually were pre-nominated for the Grammys this past year, including this first single. So I'm going to play the video for you.
Dark and stormy night, lightning strikes against the moonlight, candles burning hot inside, the old clock chimes at midnight. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. A new soul comes to life, an untold story of lies unfolds before. skies overseas. It electrifies, electrifies. Clouds of dreams. Midnight skies overseas. It electrifies, electrifies. Clouds of dreams. Midnight skies overseas. It electrifies, electrifies. This game has its final run. These chains can't hold me down. I will rise, I will rise, I will rise. This game has its final run. These chains can't hold me down. I will rise, I will rise, I will
So how many of you all could relate to Nikola Tesla, even a little bit, with what you're going through? 2, 3, 4? Well, if you can't relate yet, when you really get out there and start making things happen, you will, because that's the journey you're going to pretty much go through. It's going to be full of obstacles, it's going to be full of triumphs, and the only thing you got to remember is you have to keep going on. So what happened to me? So my journey was a little different. I went from a complete tech-based entrepreneur, finance guy background to writing comic books and making music. So one might wonder, how would that happen? Well, I kind of used my same approach as I did from a systems method of thinking at looking at what's going on with the education sector. So starting out with, these facts, like 42 million kids today can't, or actually adults even, can't read or write past 5th grade. There's over 1 million kids a year dropping out of school. And 1 out of every 4 children were essentially is going to grow up in today's age not knowing how to read. But more importantly, we have a big STEM deficiency as well, which is, ranked 25th in math, 17th in science, at least the US is. But we're going to produce 1.2 million STEM-related jobs and not be able to fulfill them. We're going to probably fulfill a third of them over the next 30 years or 10 years. So why is that happening? It's because the way we're teaching people today, now you guys are more of an exception than the norm, but if you go down to public school system and tour classes, you'll see that they're learning from a 20th century teaching approach, which is why I'm so excited to see what I've seen here, because this is a whole new way of learning, and it's not working. They need to upgrade their teaching mechanism, and this is why, because today we're now living in a hypervisual culture. There are about 500 million pictures a day that we're sharing, and that's doubling every year. So, as a lot of us grew up with Facebook in the last 10 years or so, kids today are using apps like Instagram and Snapchat, where all they see are pics with a small caption and words, and hell, they don't even use the words anymore. They just Snapchat pics to each other all day. So that's how they're used to learning. That's how they're used to sharing information. And then they go to school, and we give them a textbook. So do you see like a disconnect between how they learn and how they share information today and then what we do to them in schools? So we don't connect, we don't engage them. But so my thought was, well, what if we took a visual learning approach to teaching these kids today? What would that look like? So when I was a kid, I loved reading comics. There's something about this visual art and the storytelling brought together that would just kind of get me excited. It would really make me feel like I was reading a movie. And stories like Superman would make me feel like anything was possible. It gave me something to be inspired by. Then when I was 8 years old, I moved to India. And the comic culture there was a little bit different. Instead of reading about Superman, I was reading about Shiva. They had 2 major lines, one along our mythology, which is our Hindu gods and goddesses and our pantheon, and then the other was along our history, like the kings and queens and maharajas that ruled India and their stories. So then looking back, I recognized that our Western mythology has been covered by our superheroes. But what about our real world heroes, the people that really made a difference? What are their stories like? So I thought, well, what if I start a line of science-inspired comic books or graphic novels that talks about the engineers, inventors, and scientists that use the power of their mind and imagination to create things that actually made a difference in our world. I'll call it the Inventor Series, and I'll start with Nikola Tesla, who's one of my favorite inventors. But I had 3 problems I was up against. 1, I wasn't from the comic industry, so I didn't know where to begin. I had no resources, I had no connections, so I didn't know what to do. 2, there's no real action in the story like you see in movies today or in the comic books. There's no blood, violence, profanity. So what's going to keep people engaged? It's a battle between 2 intellectuals. And 3, there are no zombies. So the challenge was, how do I make a story about 2 engineers, exciting, without zombies? So I started with the character design. So we took the real world characters and we reimagined them. I worked with my artist, Eric Williams, and we tried to make him much more edgier and much more relevant to today. So, and reflective also of their ideas and their personality. So Tesla, for example, we gave him more of a steampunk rocker look with a slight bit of mad scientist. Edison, we made him a little bit more rigid, in the facial structure to reflect his personality as well. And then we also really leveraged the environments to communicate the emotion and what's really happening, what they're feeling inside. So in this case, you can't really see his facial expression, but you could tell Tesla's completely defeated. However, here, he looks completely elated with what he just discovered, which is the Earth can conduct electricity. So somewhere between my writing style and then our cinematic approach to art, I was hoping that maybe we could somehow keep somebody's attention. Well, in 2012, I went to my 3rd San Diego Comic-Con, but this time, my first time actually releasing a book. And to our surprise, our comic publisher, Arcana, we ended up being the top seller, or one of the top 2 sellers for our publisher. And since then, and actually these are some of my fans. Since then, we actually ended up selling over 30,000 copies, making us the #1 nonfiction graphic novel on the market. We have Scholastic now as a partner who's been distributing it through their Scholastic book fairs, which has a reach of 35 million kids. So it was the first nonfiction comic book to have that wide of a reach in the STEM space. Also, Apple ended up featuring us on the very front page next to Star Wars, Watchmen, and Superman, which are 3 of the biggest fictional properties on the planet. So having a nonfiction property next to those guys really validated that this approach actually had merit, had interest, had desirability, right? What was really exciting, though, is when school teachers started to buy the book. And they started using it in the classroom, and they used it in different ways. So as I started visiting classrooms to see how they were using it, I discovered the history teacher would use it to teach the Second Industrial Revolution from as a resource. And the art teacher used it to teach visual learning and visual art and storyboarding. Where the English teacher down the hall used it as a literary source to kind of talk about the extreme dichotomy between these 2 personalities of Nikola Tesla and Edison and how that reflects in our culture today. But what was interesting across all of it was that all the kids were engaged. They were actually motivated. They were learning. They were interested in learning. And in fact, they were even having fun. So I got to this point where I was like, okay, so we got traction. What do we do from here? So the idea now that's evolved is we're now going to create a series of books on other characters, and we started laying out this character of other inventors and other scientists that could fit this type of story genre, and create a library around nonfiction, scientists and engineers and inventors, and that's hence the Inventor Series. So the other good point about this is it also gives kids a role model, like a real world role model that they could aspire to be like. And as they learn their stories and recognize patterns in the journeys of all these inventors and entrepreneurs, they can start relating to, connecting to themselves on what they're going through at any point in life and where they need to go and what they have to go through to get there. So at this point, I want to stop and just well, I'm going to have you guys do an exercise. So you can start thinking about it now, but I'm going to have you guys take a moment in your life and just storyboard out 5 or 6 bullet points on what that story might be. So I want you to take a moment to write your story, and then we'll see where we go from there. And while I'll do that, while you guys are doing that, I'll just open up for question and answers. Yes. How old were the kids that were reading your book in school? So, what we've discovered. Sorry. Oh yeah. So he asked me how old were the kids that were reading the books in the schools. So what we've seen is kids about as young as 8 years old were reading the books. The most adoption I've seen so far was in high school. So between 10th and 12th grade, 9th and 12th grade, we're using it. Any other questions? Yes.
So there's a, what I feel there's a value to the rigor of teaching kids, and then there's a value of a different way of educating kids. Is that the previous one with the rigor is absolutely is something that we should move away from and go to this new approach completely, or there's something there as well to preserve?
Well, how do you define rigor?
We got the traditional way of teaching, where you, as you showed the book.
Okay, the textbooks and stuff.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
So his question is there any value in the old model of teaching, which is using textbooks and having a classroom environment where the teacher is teaching to the kids and telling them what to read and do homework? And where does this sit in that system? So yes, what the point of this is, most kids are not engaged today as in learning right now. So at least in our traditional school system right now. So if we could inspire and reconnect them and get them inspired and engaged to learn, then they're going to go and research everything they can on the topic. They will then read the textbooks. They will then research on the internet. They'll start looking for things that will feed their knowledge base. But if they're not engaged in the very beginning, they're not going to learn. So this is more of a tool to engage kids with storytelling and a human story essentially, and then allowing their imagination to go wild as far as learning, and then giving them the resources and enabling them to learn, and allowing them to teach each other as well. Yes?
And I would much rather have a young person admire Tesla than Justin Bieber or Lindsay Lohan, right? Or some NBA player.
Sure, I would
People
too.
far more worthy of our attention and admiration.
Right. No, I agree. Thank you. Nancy?
Ravé, is your intention to focus primarily on historical figures, or are you going to do contemporary entrepreneurs and inventors as well?
Yeah, we're looking at both. So we're also looking at contemporary, like current day entrepreneurs, or at least in the last couple of decades as well. Yes?
Are there any issues that you've seen in teaching this way? I mean, have people stopped reading traditional books from this, or has there been an increase, or have you measured that?
So what we've seen is a lot of people stopped reading traditional books before this. So this has acted as a bridge to kind of ramp them back up into reading, into traditional reading, like a novel style, essentially reading. This, so there have been tests done. So there have been Common Core type comprehension tests done, and using this as a tool to engage kids to read has significantly increased their scores. And because now they have a visual, it's kind of like it's a visual tool, right? So what's interesting is between a book, a screenplay, and a graphic novel, when you write, say, a traditional book or novel style, you have as many pages to communicate the scene, the idea, whatever it is you want to communicate. You could take 10 pages, 50 pages, however much, there's no limit. When you bring it down to a screenplay, you have to write in form of dialogue. Everything's a dialogue with maybe a little bit of narration to give context. So you bring that down to about 90 pages, and the whole movie's within 90 pages or 100 pages or so. When you're writing in a graphic novel format, you're condensing that down even further to almost a haiku, where you only have a few words per page, but you're really leveraging the visual art to communicate the story and the action and what's happening and the emotion as well. So it's really tapping into the visual culture that we have been growing up in and allowing kids and other people just to connect from that perspective. Yes.
You had listed U.S. as number 25 in math or science. What are the top 5 doing? Are they doing something different?
So that's a whole different topic, but I'll touch on it. So you have Asia, who's been doing immensely great in math and science and whatnot. They're taking also a very strong cultural approach. I think a lot of that has to do with culture. So their parents at home have a very rigorous. They're essentially, it's like a tiger culture. They're very rigorous. I come from that background as well. If I had a 98, she's asking why didn't I get 100. So it's driven from home parental culture and up. However, it doesn't mean they learn faster. It just means they're now more stressed to learn. So they're different approaches. So it's almost like I would say the force feeding mechanism of learning, or we could go and teach kids the way they're used to learning, which is what I'm suggesting. So I feel that would be more effective. I still feel you need a cultural society to enable and empower that and continue to nurture that. But I think it's more effective when we learn the way people are used to learning, or we teach the way people are used to learning. We did that with the military in MODIS. So we actually use multiple methods to engage the cadets to learn. And this is back in '99 when we had 56K baud modems. So we were doing multi-streaming, virtual reality environments with really low bandwidth. And we saw a significant increase in retention, recall, application, and transfer, the learning protocols by like 60% or higher. So it's because we were teaching them in the way they were used to learning, not the way we want them to learn. Yes?
Can you talk about, do you face any obstacles switching from tech to this completely different world? What was your journey like? A little bit more.
Sure, yeah. The question was, what were my obstacles from switching from tech to art, essentially, right? I'm still in tech, just so you know. This is just another side of me I'm expressing. So, and in a way where I feel like tech and art actually go together. So I had a game company. We built video games and we built 3D game engines. It's called Helios Interactive. And the number one thing when we build a game that we know to get kids and other people playing it is art sells. Without art, you don't engage them. So we spend a lot of our resources creating great art, graphical art, stylistic art, any kind of art that we feel will connect and communicate and engage kids today. So once we have their attention, then we realize now we got to move to game mechanics. We got to give them missions and obstacles and hurdles and rewards to keep them going until they, finish their money's worth for what they paid for the game. So I think there's a beautiful synergy between, and I think there's a necessary synergy between art and science and STEM that we need to really spend a lot more time integrating. And we see it in companies. It's happening in companies now, like Apple. Apple, without Apple's form design, they would not be the company they are today. And you see it, becoming more and more of a important issue within companies today, especially product companies. So my journey was, my parents was the first hurdle, when I did this. I mean, it wasn't really a hurdle, but they certainly were taken by surprise. Like, what? You're doing what? And then it was really just breaking into the art community, because artists by nature are very supporting and nurturing of each other, but they also are very critical, because they're all artists. Like, well, I could do that, So really just kind of breaking in and connecting with that type of community was a challenge also. And then getting into, this is my first book and actually my first full-length album, and to hit a top seller and get recognized by one of the largest music organizations. That was just systematic thinking. Trying to work my way around the system, trying to understand how it works, how they value things, and then just kind of making sure all my content kind of checks all those boxes off. So, so it's a lot of problem solving, a lot of holistic, lenses I had to use to checking out how these industries work. It's just learning a new industry, essentially. Yes?
I was wondering what your thoughts are on Common Core.
On Common Core? There are a lot of thoughts. So I think The concept of having a higher standard, I think, is good. I don't know. Actually, I know that I don't agree with necessarily the way they want to implement it. I think it's going to alienate a lot of kids. So I think it's getting us further away from our true goal than what it's intended to do. So the intention is there. I think the way they want to execute it is not the best approach. I think this forcing this kind of, it's essentially a testing environment now. It's not a learning environment. So we're not really allowing kids to be creative and innovate. We're really forcing them down to learn only these certain types of things so they can pass tests and keep moving forward. That is very unhealthy, I think, for our society. So, yes.
I really like what you've done here. What you've stood it on its end. What you've done is you've re-engaged kids, and now you've given them something that puts it back into a technology perspective, and giving them the opportunity to go back to textbooks and other ways of learning and increasing their knowledge of a specific area. Have you thought of using some sort of QR code technology to also put music into your books so that the students are totally engaged when they're listening to you in a multi-sensory approach?
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. The things we have thought about was using augmented reality type applications. So with the same book, we've been developing an app where you could use your phone and look at certain pages and have other content pop out at you. So we don't have to modify the book. So we could add video streams. We could add, there's a scene in the book where, actually, I'll show you what the book looks like, but there's a scene in the book that where Edison electrocutes an elephant in public in Coney Island. So, and he actually filmed it in real life when he did that. So if you point your phone or device to that page, it could actually show the real video of what happened, things like that. So we could kind of merge reality and my comic version of, or at least our pictorial version of how we're presenting it together. So if you want to pass this around, you're welcome to. Put one on the other side too. Yes.
There's a lot of evidence to support the fact that one characteristic of a good teacher is their storytellers. One thing that strikes me here is Tesla's life would fill a novel. How do you make a decision on what part of the story to tell in its condensed version?
That's the art, essentially, is in what's the story arc, which is why I was asking everyone to write their story, essentially, just one moment, because one moment's really a page in their book. So it took actually the original version of the story was, I'd say 20 or 30% longer. I actually had to cut it back, and I reformed kind of the latter part of the story and condensed it a little bit more. Okay, I could have gone much deeper. Because my artist was taking too long. So it's like I had to meet a deadline. So I cut out 3 chapters and condensed the story. So part of it is just, reality, time issues, and the other part is just making sure the story arc communicates several things. One is kind of a character development phase. Second is what they want, establishing what their intention is, what they want to achieve. The third is their hurdles, their obstacles that they went through. And then the fourth is their triumph, like how they overcame those obstacles. That's a story arc right there. He has many of those cycles, so I kind of ended it where JP Morgan pulls the plug on his Wardenclyffe Tower. So, yes?
So what do you think was like the most important skill or that you learned in your process of being successful in like the tech world and the art world?
So his question was, what I feel was the most successful or important skill I learned in these, the tech world, the science world, and the art world. One is, a couple of things. One is I looked at things in terms of a system. So in the tech world, it's much more obvious because we think in terms of systems as engineers. That's how we're trained. So we look at things in terms of box. Here's the box. Here's the inputs. Here are the outputs, and here's the dynamic of the stuff that happens inside based on, what's going on. What I learned was there's always a bigger box. So the box is always inside a bigger box, and that box is inside a bigger box, and so on and so forth. So you got to pick your box right. Pick the right box first. when I move from industry to industry, I look at the industry as a box as well. And I see, okay, what are the dynamics? Who are the players? What do they value? What's important to them? Because what's important to, what I really realized is the culture in these different industries are significantly different in the sense, they're fundamentally the same, but their priority of what they value is different. So recognizing what those value priorities are, as far as in the art, it's, they value, they really value free expression and openness, and they don't like being commercialized. That's taking away from the value of an artist. Where in the science industry, everything is moving towards you want to be commercialized, you want to be accepted by a larger audience or a larger need. So it's the very opposite. So how do you kind of balance between the two? And you need both, and you need authenticity as well. But what's a bridge? What's the right balance? So I had to learn that. What else? Also, I learned that there's several types of people. There's the player, or the actor. There's the director. There's the producer. And each one of us is one of those roles. Or a lot of times we play multiple roles, but we dominantly one role. So the actor is typically in a company, one of the employees, doing their role, playing their part, right? The director is typically the head of that company, or CEO, or some leader, right? The producer is typically the guys on the board or the investors that are putting the teams together to do whatever it is they're trying to make, like in making a film. So I learned that figuring out what you are as early as you can figure that out and recognize that gives you a significant advantage on where to use your time and energy and money, because I played all the roles, but I realized that my strongest role is being a producer and putting people and teams together, having an idea, assembling teams, getting them together, giving them a vision, a common vision to pull forward, and allowing them to execute and just kind of directing and guiding them. It's no different than what you see in any kind of startup environment or any other large existing organization. So there's a lot of commonalities. It's just really picking your role and then, really maximizing it. So, yes?
So I guess a common stereotype in society is that boys are more interested in comic books than girls are. So I was just wondering, with your book, were you able to see kind of like a change in the gender distribution at all?
Okay, so our question was, are boys more interested in comics than girls? And have I seen that change? Well, if you ever go to Comic-Con in San Diego, you'll get a really good dose of who really cares about comics. There's probably a larger population of men, but there's a whole lot of women that are out there dressed up and playing, excited about the characters they care about, dressing up, reading comics. So comics is not predominantly men anymore, or I don't even know if they ever have been. And that's just a U.S. culture. Now, if you go outside of the U.S., the comic culture is actually really strong, even stronger in a lot of other countries. Like Japan, reading a comic, that's normal. You'll go walking around, just people are reading comics, they're not reading novels. On a train, most people will be reading comics. So it's just depending on where you're at in the world. But I'd say women are just as excited and interested in comics as men are. You go to the argument, well, men typically are more visual than women, but I think people just care about good stories. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate your time. Thanks. One real quick question. Did anyone actually do or write down any kind of thoughts on their story? Because if you have, I know speaking with Alex, she would like to collect whatever story points or stories you guys come up with. And the one thing I didn't show you was actually after this. This is how we create a story. We first write our story points. I should have said this earlier. And then we kind of sketch out our diagram of like what the panels will look like. And then we kind of fill in the word bubbles, and then we actually go to final art. So it's a good exercise just to kind of clear your head and figure out, what your story is. So thanks, guys.